The Galactic Concord had ruled the stars for 12,000 years, and in all that time, they believed they had seen everything the universe could offer. They had cataloged over 800 species across 1,000 worlds. From the mighty Virax with their armored hides to the ancient crystalline Denari, who could live for 10,000 years without aging a single day. They had built space stations the size of moons and ships that could cross galaxies in the blink of an eye. They believed themselves wise beyond measure, and they believed they understood survival better than any species that had ever existed. Then they found Earth. Ambassador Velthorn of the Silithine was the first to make contact with humanity, and from the moment his ship entered their solar system, he knew something was wrong with this species. His preliminary scans showed a world of chaos, a planet where the weather could kill you, where the ground could shake and swallow cities whole, where fire could rain from mountains and waves could rise higher than buildings. How could anything survive on such a world, he wondered. When he finally met the humans face to face, his confusion only grew deeper and more troubling. They were small compared to most galactic species, standing barely 2 meters tall at their largest. They had no natural armor to protect their soft pink and brown skin. They had no claws or fangs worth mentioning. They could not regenerate lost limbs or heal wounds with thought alone. They needed to breathe constantly, drink water every few hours, and spend a third of their lives unconscious in something they called sleep. Their bodies could only survive in a narrow range of temperatures, and they lived for barely a century before their own cells betrayed them and they died of old age. Velthorn sent his report to the Galactic Council with a heavy heart, for he genuinely pitied these fragile creatures. Classification recommendation, he wrote. Category 9 fragile species, the lowest survivability rating in our system. These beings require immediate protection protocols. They must be assigned guardian escorts for any travel beyond their homeworld. They must wear environmental suits at all times in non-Earth conditions. They must never be allowed in dangerous sectors or combat zones. To do otherwise would be to sentence them to certain death. The Council agreed without debate, for the evidence seemed clear to everyone who reviewed it. Humanity was weak. Humanity was fragile, and humanity needed the protection of their stronger galactic neighbors. The Elena Vasquez received the news of humanity's classification in her office at the United Nations Space Authority. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent solving impossible problems. She had climbed mountains in her youth, served in 3 military conflicts, survived a helicopter crash in the Amazon, and once walked 40 kilometers through a desert with a broken leg because giving up was simply not in her nature. When the Silithine ambassador presented her with the official classification documents, she read them carefully from beginning to end. Then she did something that made Velthorn's 4 hearts skip their rhythm. She laughed. It was not a gentle laugh or a polite laugh. It was a deep sound that came from her belly and shook her shoulders. Category 9 fragile species, she repeated, wiping tears of amusement from her eyes. Ambassador, I mean no disrespect to you or your council, but I think you may have made a small error in your assessment. Velthorn's long neck tilted to the side in confusion. I assure you, Dr. Vasquez, our methods are sound and have been refined over millennia. We have classified thousands of species, and we have never been wrong. Your biology speaks for itself. You are among the most vulnerable beings we have ever encountered. Elena smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Velthorn want to step backward. You looked at our bodies, she said, but you did not look at our history. You saw what we are made of, but you did not see what we have survived. She stood and walked to the window of her office, looking out at the city below millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that they had just been labeled the weakest species in the galaxy. Do you know what my grandmother survived, Ambassador? She lived through a war that killed 60 million people. Do Do you know what my great-great-grandfather survived? A disease that wiped out a third of his continent. Do you know what my species has survived? Ice ages that covered our world in frozen death. Asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun. Volcanic eruptions that poisoned the air we breathe. And through all of it, through every disaster and plague and war, we kept going. We did not have armor, so we made armor. We did not have claws, so we made weapons. We did not have the strength of predators, so we became something worse. We became creatures that never stop, never quit, never surrender. Beltharin listened to her words with growing unease. Dr. Vasquez, I appreciate your species' pride in its accomplishments. But survival on a single planet is very different from survival in the galaxy. Out there, you will face dangers beyond your imagination, pirates, predators, hostile environments, and wars that span star systems. You need our protection. Elena turned back to face him, and now her smile had faded into something harder and more serious. We will accept your classification for now, Ambassador. We will wear your suits and follow your escorts and stay out of your dangerous zones. But I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that I warned you. She rolled up the sleeve of her jacket, revealing an arm covered in scars, some from accidents, some from violence, some from surgeries that had saved her life when her own body tried to kill her. You see weakness when you look at us, she said quietly. But what you are really seeing is 4 billion years of fighting to survive on a world that wanted us dead. Every human alive today is descended from survivors, from the ones who refused to die. That is not weakness, Ambassador. That is something your council has never seen before. Beltharin left Earth that day with a strange feeling in his chest that he could not name. He told himself that the human woman was simply proud and foolish. He told himself that the galaxy would teach humanity humility soon enough. He told himself that everything would proceed exactly as the council predicted. But deep in his heart, in a place he did not want to examine too closely, he wondered if perhaps the Galactic Concord had finally made its first mistake. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Concord, and Dr. Elena Vasquez had grown tired of being treated like a child. Everywhere she went, alien guards followed her like shadows. Every room she entered had been checked 3 times for dangers. Every meal she ate had been tested to make sure it would not harm her delicate human body. She understood that the aliens meant well, but their constant protection made her feel more like a prisoner than a diplomat. When the invitation came to visit Kethver Station, she accepted it immediately, hoping that a change of scenery might improve her mood. Kethver was one of the largest trade hubs in the sector, a massive structure that floated in the darkness of space like a city made of light and metal. Over 40,000 beings lived and worked there, buying and selling goods from 100 different worlds. The station was considered one of the safest places in the galaxy, protected by defense shields and security forces from a dozen species. Elena arrived with her usual escort of Silithine, guards and a small team of human scientists who had been cleared for off-world travel. For the first 2 days, everything was peaceful and calm. She attended diplomatic meetings, toured the markets, and even managed to find a vendor who sold something that tasted almost like coffee. On the 3rd day, everything changed. The attack came without warning, striking like a fist from the darkness of space. 12 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded the station before anyone could react. They were Varax vessels, and they flew the black flags of the Syndicate, the most feared pirate organization in 3 sectors. Within minutes, boarding parties had cut through the station's hull and poured inside like a flood of armored death. The Varax were massive creatures, standing 3 meters tall with thick plates of natural armor covering their bodies. Their arms ended in claws that could tear through metal, and their mouths were filled with teeth designed for crushing bone. They moved through the station with brutal efficiency, killing anyone who resisted and herding the survivors into the main cargo bay. Elena found herself pushed into the bay, along with hundreds of other beings, her Silithine guards nowhere to be seen. She later learned that they had died trying to protect her, cut down by Virax plasma rifles in the first moments of the attack. The cargo bay was a scene of pure terror. The Morvathi were weeping, their acidic tears burning small holes in the floor beneath them. The crystalline Denari had developed stress fractures across their glass-like bodies, small cracks spreading with every passing minute. The insectoid Khajiitic had gone completely still, their minds shutting down from fear in a state their species called the death sleep. And the humans? The humans were quiet, their eyes moving around the room, counting guards and noting exits. Elena found herself standing next to a young Silithine soldier named Kethril, who had survived the initial attack with a deep wound in his side. Purple blood seeped through his fingers as he tried to hold himself together. "Stay behind me," he whispered to Alana, his voice weak but determined. "You are Category 9. You cannot fight. You cannot run. You can only hide. When they come for us, I will try to buy you time to escape." Elena looked at the young soldier with something like pity in her eyes. "How old are you, Kethril?" "I have seen 47 cycles," he answered, confused by the question. 47, Elena repeated softly. "I have seen 53 years, which I think is about the same. Do you know how I have lived so long on a world as dangerous as Earth?" Kethril shook his head, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "By hiding," Elena said, "and by fighting. And right now, there is nowhere to hide." She looked across the cargo bay, counting the Virax guards. There were 12 of them, each one armed with a plasma rifle and standing at key positions around the room. The leader of the pirates had announced that the Concord's military response was 18 hours away. He had also announced that he would begin executing hostages in 6 hours unless his demands were met. 6 hours, Elena thought. 6 hours of waiting and hoping and praying that someone would save them. 6 hours of watching these aliens tremble and cry and break apart from fear. She had never been good at waiting. "Kethril," she said quietly, "how much do you know about human biology?" "Only what the files say," he answered. "You are fragile. You are weak. You have no natural defenses." Elena smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "The files are wrong. We have one defense that no other species in the galaxy seems to have. When we are in danger, our bodies release chemicals that make us faster, stronger, and almost immune to pain. Our hearts beat harder, our muscles fill with blood, and our minds become focused on one single purpose: survival. We call this response fight or flight, and it is the reason my species has not gone extinct." She began to remove her diplomatic jacket, folding it neatly and setting it aside. Beneath it, she wore a simple black shirt that left her arms bare. Kethril stared at those arms with his 4 eyes, seeing for the first time the map of scars that covered her skin. There were long white lines from cuts and short pink circles from burns. There was a jagged mark on a forearm where bone had once broken through skin. There was a faded tattoo of a skull with wings, the symbol of a human military unit that had seen more combat than most Concord soldiers would see in a lifetime. "What are you doing?" Kethril asked, his voice rising with alarm. "I am going to do something stupid," Elena answered. "I am going to do something that will probably get me killed. But I refuse to sit here and wait for death like a lamb waiting for slaughter." She rolled up her sleeves slowly, deliberately, making sure every scar was visible. 12 guards, she said. "I have faced worse odds. I once survived a bar fight in Rio against 7 men who wanted to kill me. I once fought off 3 muggers in Cairo with nothing but my bare hands. I once walked into a war zone to rescue wounded soldiers while bullets flew around my head." She laughed, and the sound made several nearby aliens turn to look at her with confusion and fear. 12 guards, she repeated. Let me show you what a Category 9 fragile species can really do. And then she began to walk toward the nearest Varax, her hands loose at her sides and her eyes burning with something ancient and terrible. Something that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and wars. Something called defiance. The first Varax guard did not even see Elena coming. He was standing near a stack of cargo containers, his plasma rifle held loosely in his massive clawed hands, his attention focused on a group of weeping Morvathi in the corner. He thought he had nothing to fear from the small creatures he was guarding. He thought wrong. Elena moved with a speed that should have been impossible for a species classified as Category 9 fragile. Her body was flooded with adrenaline, that ancient chemical gift from millions of years of evolution, and it made her faster and stronger than she had any right to be. She did not have claws, so she used the hard edge of her palm. She did not have fangs, so she used her elbow. She did not have armor, so she simply made sure she was never where the blow was going to land. The guard turned at the last moment, sensing something wrong, but by then it was already too late. Elena's palm struck the soft joint where his arm met his shoulder, hitting the one spot on a Varax body that was not protected by armor. The guard roared in pain and shock as his arm went limp, his rifle clattering to the floor. Before he could recover, Elena had already grabbed the weapon and swung it like a club, smashing it into the side of his head with all her strength. The Varax fell. Every being in the cargo bay froze, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. A human, a tiny, soft, Category 9 human, had just taken down a Varax warrior in seconds. The other guards reacted immediately, turning their weapons toward Elena and opening fire. Plasma bolts screamed through the air, burning holes in the walls and floor. But Elena was already moving, ducking behind a cargo container as the first shots flew past her head. She was breathing hard now, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Her body was telling her to run, to hide, to find safety. This was the flight part of the response. But Elena had never been very good at running. She burst from cover and charged the second guard, using the rifle she had taken as a shield to block his first shot. The plasma melted through the weapon in her hands, burning her palms with terrible heat. She did not slow down. She threw the ruined rifle at the guard's face, and when he raised his arms to block it, she was already inside his reach. Her knee came up hard into his stomach, finding the gap in his armor. Her elbow followed, cracking against the side of his skull. He fell, and she kept moving. The watching aliens could not understand what they were seeing. This creature should have been dead a dozen times over. She had no armor, no weapons, no protection of any kind. And yet she fought like a demon from the old stories, a spirit of violence that could not be stopped by pain or fear or the certainty of death. By the third guard, Elena was bleeding from a deep cut on her forehead. The blood ran into her eyes, turning the world red. She wiped it away and kept fighting. By the fifth guard, she had cracked ribs on her left side. Every breath felt like fire in her chest. She ignored the pain and kept fighting. By the seventh guard, she had acquired another plasma rifle from a fallen enemy. She used it as a club because she had already used all the ammunition. Ammunition is finite, she growled through bloody teeth. But violence is renewable. The remaining guards had stopped trying to shoot her one at a time. Now they were working together, trying to corner her, trying to overwhelm her with numbers. But Elena had been fighting since before some of these guards were born. She had learned to fight in the streets of Rio, in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the training grounds of the world's most dangerous military forces. She knew how to use her environment as a weapon. She knew how to turn her enemy's strength against them. She knew how to keep going when her body screamed for her to stop. A Varax grabbed her from behind, his massive arms wrapping around her chest. She felt her ribs grind together, felt the air being crushed from her lungs. Any other species would have given up, would have accepted defeat. Elena threw her head backward with all her remaining strength, smashing the back of her skull into the guard's face. She felt something crack, his nose, his teeth. She did not know or care. His grip loosened and she tore herself free. The last two guards came at her together, and for a moment, Elena thought that this was finally the end. She was exhausted, broken, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Her body had given everything it had. But then something strange happened, something the aliens had no name for. Elena got angry. Not the hot anger that burns fast and fades faster. This was the cold anger that humans call spite, the refusal to lose, the determination to keep fighting even when victory is impossible. She had not survived 53 years on Earth to die in a cargo bay at the hands of overgrown lizards. She had not climbed mountains and crossed deserts and walked through war zones to be killed by pirates. She was Elena Vasquez, and she did not know how to quit. The last two guards fell in a blur of fists and elbows and knees. When it was over, Elena stood swaying in the middle of the cargo bay, surrounded by 12 unconscious Varax warriors. Blood dripped from her broken nose. Her hands were burned and bleeding. 3 ribs were cracked, maybe 4. One eye was swelling shut. She could barely breathe, barely stand, barely think. But she was alive, and she was the only one still standing. The cargo bay was completely silent. Every alien in the room was staring at her with expressions of pure shock and disbelief. The Morvathi had stopped weeping. The crystalline Denari had stopped cracking. Even the Khajiit had woken from their death sleep to witness this impossible moment. Kethral, the young Silithine soldier, crawled forward with tears streaming from all 4 of his eyes. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible? You are Category 9. You should be dead." Elena looked down at him with her one good eye, and despite everything, despite the pain and the blood and the certain knowledge that she might not survive the hour, she laughed. "Category 9, she repeated, spitting blood onto the floor. "Your council looked at humans and saw weakness, but they did not understand what they were really seeing. We are not the species that survives because we are strong. We are the species that survives because we are too stubborn to die." She looked around at the freed hostages, at the fallen guards, at the blood and chaos around her. "Anyone else need protecting?" she asked. No one answered. They were all too busy trying to understand what kind of creature they had been sharing the galaxy with. The footage from Kethver Station spread across the galactic concord like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the Alliance had seen the recording, a single human female defeating 12 Varax warriors with nothing but her bare hands and an unbreakable will to survive. Within days, the video had been viewed over 1 billion times. Within weeks, it had changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. Ambassador Velthorin watched the footage in his private chambers on the Concord's capital world. And with every passing second, he felt his certainty crumbling like sand. He had been so sure of his classification. He had been so confident that humans were fragile, weak, in need of protection. Now, he was watching one of those fragile creatures tear through a squad of Varax like they were nothing. He called an emergency session of the Galactic Council, demanding that all representatives attend immediately. The Great Hall filled within the hour. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds gathering to discuss the impossible thing they had all witnessed. Velthorn stood at the central podium, his long neck bent with shame and confusion. "Fellow representatives," he began, "I stand before you today to admit that I have made a terrible mistake. When I classified humanity as a Category 9 fragile species, I believed I was acting with wisdom and compassion. I believed I was protecting a weak species from the dangers of the galaxy. I was wrong." He activated the holographic display, showing the footage from Kethver Station once more. The representatives watched in silence as Elena Vasquez fought her impossible battle. "Look at this creature," Valthorin said. "She is bleeding, she is broken, she is outnumbered. By every measure of biology and logic, she should be dead. But she refuses to fall. She refuses to surrender. She fights with a ferocity that I have never seen in any species, not even the Virax themselves." A Morvathi representative rose from her seat, her voice trembling. "We have studied the humans more closely since this incident," she said. "What we have found is deeply disturbing." She activated her own display, showing images from Earth's history. These creatures willingly climb mountains of frozen death for entertainment. They call this activity mountaineering, and thousands of them die doing it every year. And yet they continue, generation after generation, as if death means nothing to them. A crystalline Denari delegate spoke next, his voice like wind through broken glass. "They consume a chemical called capsaicin that causes extreme pain to their nervous system. This chemical evolved in plants specifically to prevent creatures from eating them. Humans eat it deliberately. They call it spicy food, and they enjoy it. They have competitions to see who can consume the most painful amounts." The Khajiitic representative clicked her mandibles in horror. Their medical practices are beyond comprehension. When their bodies malfunction, they cut themselves open with sharp tools, reach inside their own flesh, and repair themselves by hand. They call this surgery, and they have been doing it for thousands of years. Any other species would die of shock from such trauma. Humans simply go to sleep, let their doctors cut them apart, and wake up asking for something to eat. More and more evidence piled up as the session continued. Humans had split the atom, the fundamental building block of matter, and then used it to create weapons of unimaginable destruction. They had used these weapons on each other, killing hundreds of thousands in seconds. And then they had continued living on the same planet, knowing that at any moment, someone might use those weapons again. Humans had survived ice ages that lasted thousands of years. They had survived plagues that killed half their population. They had survived asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, floods, famines, and countless wars against each other. Their entire history was a record of disasters that should have wiped them out, and their stubborn refusal to let that happen. The Khajiitic delegate spoke again, her voice now filled with something close to fear. "We made an error in our assessment," she said. "We looked at their bodies and saw prey soft, slow, vulnerable. But we did not look at their behavior. We did not see what they truly are. They are not a Category 9 fragile species. They are persistent predators wearing the skin of prey." The Morvathi ambassador pulled up human biological files on the display. Their bodies produce chemicals during stress that override pain, fear, and exhaustion. They call this adrenaline, but that is only part of it. When pushed to their limits, humans enter a state where normal physical restrictions simply stop applying. Their hearts pump harder, their muscles grow stronger, their minds become focused on a single purpose. We have seen species with natural armor. We have seen species with deadly venom. We have seen species that can regenerate entire limbs. But we have never seen a species that can simply refuse to acknowledge its own limitations. Valthorin listened to the mounting evidence with growing horror. He thought back to his first meeting with Dr. Elena Vasquez, to the scars on her arms and the strange smile on her face. She had tried to warn him. She had told him that the council was making a mistake, and he had dismissed her words as foolish pride. "What do we do?" a young delegate asked, his voice trembling. "How do we classify a species like this?" The eldest crystalline Denari rose slowly from his seat, being who had lived for 8,000 years and had seen civilizations rise and fall. "In all my existence," he said, "I have never encountered a species quite like humanity. They are not strong in the way we understand strength. They are not fast or armored or venomous. But they possessed something far more dangerous. They possessed the inability to accept defeat. He paused, letting his words sink in. I move that we immediately reclassify humanity from Category 9 fragile to Category 1 existential concern. The vote was unanimous. Every delegate from every species agreed that humanity could no longer be considered harmless. Velthorn left the council chamber that day with a new understanding of the universe. He had spent his entire career believing that the galaxy was full of dangers that threatened weaker species. Now he realized that one of those weaker species might be the most dangerous thing the galaxy had ever encountered. And the worst part? The humans had been trying to tell them all along. They had been laughing at the Council's protection protocols. They had been smiling at the guards assigned to keep them safe, because they knew something the galaxy was only beginning to understand. Humanity did not need protection. Humanity had never needed protection, and heaven help anyone who threatened the things humanity chose to protect. 3 weeks had passed since the incident on Kethra Station, and Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the full Galactic Council for the first time since humanity's reclassification. Her right arm was still wrapped in a regeneration sling alien, technology that could heal wounds in days that would have taken months on Earth. Her ribs had been repaired by Morvathi medical specialists. Her broken nose had been reset by a Kachitic surgeon with hands more precise than any human doctor. But the scars on her face and arms remained. She had asked the doctors to leave them. Those scars were her history, her proof that she had survived everything the universe had thrown at her. She was not going to erase them just because they made aliens uncomfortable. The council chamber was packed with representatives from every species in the Concord. They had come to see the human who had changed everything, the small, soft creature who had defeated 12 Varax warriors with nothing but determination and rage. Elena looked out at the sea of alien faces and felt no fear. She had faced death in that cargo bay. She had felt her bones break and her blood spill. What could a room full of politicians possibly do to her after that? You asked why humans needed no protection, she began, her voice calm and steady. You looked at our soft skin and short lives and saw weakness. You measured our bodies and found them lacking in every category that your science considers important. No armor, no claws, no venom, no regeneration. You looked at everything we did not have and you completely missed what we do have. She activated the holographic display behind her, and images from Earth's history began to fill the chamber. The delegates saw humans crossing frozen wastelands with nothing but animal skins to protect them. They saw humans building pyramids and cathedrals with nothing but their hands and simple tools. They saw humans sailing across endless oceans in ships made of wood, not knowing if they would ever see land again. 4 billion years ago, Elena said, life began on Earth. And from the very first moment, our planet has been trying to kill us. The weather changes without warning, ice ages that last millennia, heat waves that turn forests to ash. The ground shakes and swallows cities whole. Fire rains from mountains and poisons the air we breathe. Disease sweeps across continents and kills millions in a single season. And through all of it, through every disaster, every plague, every extinction event, we survived. More images appeared on the display, humans at war, humans in hospitals, humans climbing mountains and diving into oceans and launching themselves into space. We are not the descendants of the strong, Elena continued. We are the descendants of the stubborn, the survivors, the ones who looked at impossible odds and said, I refuse to die today. Every single human alive carries the genes of ancestors who should have been killed 1,000 times over, but who kept going anyway. She pulled up images of human sports, boxing, wrestling, football, mixed martial arts. You want to know something funny about my species? We hurt each other for entertainment. We invented games where we punch and kick and throw each other to the ground, and we do it for fun. We climb mountains that kill dozens of people every year. We jump out of airplanes and trust that a piece of fabric will slow our fall. We swim in oceans filled with creatures that want to eat us. Not because we have to, because we want to. The delegates stared at the images with expressions of disbelief and horror. You gave us Category 9 status because you thought we were fragile, Elena said. But you were confusing soft with weak. Yes, our skin tears easily. Yes, our bones can break. Yes, we can only survive in a narrow range of temperatures. But that is exactly why we are dangerous. Because we know how fragile we are, and we have spent our entire existence learning how to survive anyway. She changed the display one more time, showing the mushroom cloud of a nuclear explosion. We split the atom, she said quietly. We took the fundamental building block of reality, and we broke it open. We used it to create weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. And then, and this is the important part, we kept living. We knew that at any moment, someone could push a button and end everything. We knew that we had created the means of our own extinction. And we just kept going. We went to work, we raised our children, we built our civilizations. Because that is what humans do. We live in the shadow of death, and we refuse to let it stop us. Elena stepped forward, her eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives. You have species with natural armor that can stop plasma bolts. You have species with venom that can kill in seconds. You have species that live for thousands of years without aging. And you were afraid of us? She smiled, and it was the same unsettling smile she had shown Ambassador Velthorin on the day they first met. You should be. Not because we are strong in the ways you understand, but because we are something you have never seen before. We are the species that looked at the void, at the infinite darkness between the stars, and said, I can take that. We are the species that buries our dead and then goes back to work the next day. We are the species that builds cities on fault lines and farms on the slopes of volcanoes. We are the species that falls down, gets back up, and keeps walking, no matter how many times the universe tries to knock us down. The chamber was completely silent. Even the eldest crystalline Denari, who had lived through the rise and fall of empires, could find no words to respond. Elena rolled down her sleeves slowly, covering the scars that told the story of her life. You reclassified us as Category 1 existential concern, she said. Perhaps that is accurate. Perhaps humanity is a threat to the established order of this galaxy. But let me leave you with one final thought. She turned to look directly at Ambassador Velthorin, who sat frozen in his seat. For 6 months, you assigned guards to protect us. You gave us environmental suits and kept us away from dangerous places. You treated us like children who could not take care of ourselves. But on Kethver Station, when the Virax came, your guards died in the first 30 seconds. Your armor and weapons and training meant nothing against an enemy who did not care about rules. And who was left standing at the end? A human woman with no armor, no weapons, and no training in your alien combat techniques. Just 53 years of refusing to give up. Elena walked toward the exit of the chamber, then stopped and turned back one last time. You asked why humans needed no protection. I showed you the answer. Now the question you should be asking is different. She smiled a warm smile this time, filled with something that looked almost like friendship. The question is, do you want humanity protecting you? Because we protect our friends with the same stubbornness that we use to protect ourselves. And believe me, there is nothing in this galaxy more dangerous than a human who has decided that someone else is worth dying for. She rolled her sleeves back up, showing her scars one more time. Think about it, she said. You know where to find us. And then she walked out of the chamber, leaving the entire Galactic Council to wonder what kind of universe they were living in now that they knew what humans truly were.